Hi there, everyone. Welcome to this Fireside Content Chat. My name is Elizabeth Irvin. I'm the VP of Marketing for MarketMuse, and I'm joined today by Peter Mahoney, founder and CEO of Plana, to talk about connecting content and business outcomes. For those who may not be familiar with you, can you give a quick overview for everyone?
Sure. So Plana is a SaaS platform that we think of as a marketing leadership platform. So if you want to build leadership marketing plans and optimize your outcomes, that's what we're used for. Building plans, managing the financials, measuring ROI, and optimizing your plan based on the outcomes and ROI. That's what we do.
Interesting. Okay, let's jump in. So asking for budget is always a tough conversation, especially if the approver hasn't had the hands-on experience that someone is asking for help with. How challenging is it to make a case for content investments? What have you seen there?
It depends is the answer, and you can be really successful if you follow a couple of basic guidelines. First of all, you should understand whether it's an existing strategy of the company or not. So if you have an existing strategy around content marketing or thought leadership or some other different way that they might want to talk about a content strategy, it's much easier. If not, you need to start by building what I call a thesis for value. What that means is you need to determine for yourself first, before you can convince others, what is the thesis around why you're doing content marketing? And I like to ask myself the question, to what end, all the time? So people say, well, we need to be a thought leader. Well, to what end? What do you want to get out of that? Well, we want to get more leads. To what end? We want to convert those to new customers. Great, now we're somewhere. So we think a great content strategy is going to get us new customers or more repeat customers or shorten a sales cycle or something like that. You need to think about the overall strategy and your thesis for the value you're creating with your content strategy. Once you have the ability to articulate that, you can share it with others, and it's a much easier conversation.
Okay, so my next question was going to be around connecting content initiatives to business outcomes. So if you have your thesis of what you're looking to do, assuming you kind of drill into that and go into more details, you can really make a clear directing line between even a specific piece of content or a campaign or initiative to how you would prove the ROI of it. How does that look in practice?
In practice, the way it works is, first of all, you have to start with that thesis. You have to say, all right, what am I trying to do? And then you need to say, well, what are the business metrics that determine whether I was successful or not? Whether it's higher conversion rate, whether it's more revenue, whether I can directly attribute something to a campaign, et cetera. You need to understand what those are. The other really important thing to do is to pick the right level for measurement. I'm actually not a big advocate of saying, you should be able to determine the business value of this particular blog post or white paper or ebook. What you should be able to do is you should be able to understand in aggregate, what are you trying to do with your content strategy? And in aggregate, what is the benefit of your content strategy? Now, as you get more sophisticated, you may be able to break that down into campaigns and understand the individual campaign. But I put it this way. If you go to the library, the value is the library, not each individual book in the library. It's the collection. And that's important to understand. You need to make sure that you're strategically defining the value of your content strategy or what you expect it to be. And then you're measuring based on how you're moving the needle overall based on your content strategy.
And so when someone is reporting on moving that needle, if it's moving or if it's which direction it's moving, and they're showcasing it to the larger team or an executive team, do you have advice for presenting those results and selling up so that they can continue with the effort, pivot as needed? What advice do you have?
Absolutely. So one of the factors that makes the biggest difference that I've seen in a successful career is the ability to sell an idea internally or externally. But selling an idea internally and selling the value of what you're doing is actually a really critical skill to have. And it's important when you're communicating to an executive audience, especially, to do a few things. And I come at this from some experience. So before doing this, I was the CMO for about a $2 billion software company. And I had to get lots and lots of things approved. I was also general managers of very, very large businesses in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So I had to hone these skills a lot, sometimes outside of your comfort zone. And there are a few key things. I'm actually going to give you 8. Okay, you ready? Because there are 8 things I'm going to give you. First is focus on the results, not the activities. So when you're presenting your content strategy in the results, don't say, I did these 72 things. Focus more on what the business impact is. So I have a content strategy. You might be able to sort of rough out what you did, but it's less about, here's a list of things I did, and more about what's the business impact. Okay? Mm-hmm. Second is show how that relates to your business goals. What was my thesis for value, and what have I actually delivered? So if you said, great, I generated $1 million of pipeline. Well, okay, was your goal to do 2? Or was your goal to do $500,000? It's really important to be able to relate that to what the expectations were. Third is communicate the value in business terms, not in wonky content terms. So you got to be able to make sure that you're communicating to the audience the way that they're going to be assessing not only your investment, but the investment in buying more cloud services for IT or getting a new facility for a building or something like that. So make sure that you communicate in real business value. Fourth is provide people with context so they understand what good means. So not only this, so if you can bring in some external view as an example, well, among our peers, we're 50% better than the rest. That is super valuable if you can do it. Fifth is report your results regularly and consistently. So sometimes you don't have that luxury. You don't have the opportunity to present this kind of information on an ongoing basis. But if you do, make sure that you're presenting the same data from time to time to time, because otherwise you're going to leave people with a perception that, hey, Elizabeth is just changing the rules on me and presenting something different each time. So be consistent about it. Sixth, we're almost at the end. Sixth is tell the truth. So you need to actually say what's happening, even if it wasn't good. Seventh is tell the whole truth. And that means not only say what really happened, but if there's context or additional detail that you may not want to share, but it's actually really important for overall understanding for the business, make sure that you are fulsome in your communication. And then eighth, you want to educate, but don't be preachy. So you want to educate, especially to an executive audience who may not understand the strategy, the value behind content. Don't treat them like they're 2-year-olds, but make sure that you're communicating clearly and take the opportunity to help them understand the value of this kind of a content strategy, because it's incredibly important in today's world. Mm-hmm.
That all makes sense. And I know I'm guilty of doing some of those things in the past. But it's the clarity and painting the whole picture is going to make it a lot easier as you go and as you build trust and ask for more down the line, including potentially experimentation and innovation budget. Do you see marketing teams with a specific line item for experimentation, and how can they push for this and help others become comfortable with potentially things not working when they experiment, and to your previous point in those steps? I'd love to talk about experimentation and innovation.
Absolutely. And if you do the last thing well, so if you develop trust with the executive audience and say that, you know what, when Elizabeth comes to me and presents her results, I'm going to know the truth. Then all of a sudden you've got a much better license to run experiments, because by definition, experiments are not always going to turn out the way you thought they're going to turn out. And in fact, I like to tell marketers that they need to, when they're managing the marketing function versus when they're communicating their marketing, managing the function, they need to act more like a scientist and less like a promoter. So a lot of marketers go immediately into promotional mode and try to spin and say this was great, maybe when it wasn't great. You need to take a sort of a cold, calculated scientific view when you're running experiments. So let's talk about experiments. Incredibly important for every plan to have some space for experimentation. So when we're building plans for a customer, because we do that as we're bringing people on board, we typically advocate that depending on the scale of the business, somewhere between 5 and 15% of their overall budget should be left for experiments. So if you're a high velocity consumer business, you might need more. If you've got more flexibility and higher sort of media spend, then you might use more. If you're a little bit more restrictive, you might be in the lower end of that scale. But you should always have the ability to have pure experiments. And then the second thing is, even within the context of a campaign, you should have the ability to run some experiments to run an optimization. And in the way you do that, by the way, is when you build a plan, you need to plan by campaigns. Don't plan by, I'm going to spend this much on media and this much on pencils and this much on t-shirts. Nobody cares. If you plan and organize your plan by the campaigns, then you can create these broader buckets that you're optimizing within. And that, by definition, is just going to give you a little bit more wiggle room as you think about how you're building this experimentation natively into your plan.
Absolutely. We actually got a question from someone in the audience. How do you deal with unrealistic business goals, either that we've set ourselves or that have been maybe in place before you joined, or is a stretch goal that may be too far of a stretch? How do you handle that?
A fantastic question. We see it all the time. So the first thing to do is test the logic and do the math. So you may have data, historical data that talks about either cost per outcome as an example. So what does it typically cost you to get a customer, to get a lead, to get someone to interact, to get a new visitor to your web page? That kind of data we kind of spit out for people, but a lot of people have the ability to measure that. So if you have that and say that, hey, my cost per new qualified lead is $150 historically, and you're expecting me to do it for $3. That's a big problem. So again, if you have that data, that's really useful. If the data isn't there, what you need to do is you need to walk through all of the related assumptions, walk through the logic chain, and make sure people really understand what's supposed to happen, and is each step realistic or not. And it's up to us as managers to clearly communicate if there's risk. And people don't want to hear it especially, but it's your job. So what you need to do is, if the expectations are unrealistic, the last thing you want to do is say, oh, that's never going to happen, and I'm just going to go and do my thing. What the responsible leader would do is they would really think about it, figure out where they can make optimizations, and say, I don't think that this is the outcome that we're going to get. And this is why. Bring in some data if you have it to try to illustrate the thing. And this is what I'm going to do to try and get the best possible outcome. And this is how we should set our expectation. And oh, by the way, these are the implications of doing that. So it's really important, because a lot of people get stuck with those kinds of really unrealistic expectations. And if you just ignore it, it's going to fester and just get worse. So you can't ignore it.
Yeah, that snowball gets bigger. So along those lines, if you were to make or introduce changes to a plan that's already in flight, things are in place, the outcomes and everything has been vetted and approved, but something happens maybe out of your control.
Like a pandemic?
Like a pandemic. It's a great example. How do you react and rally and pivot elegantly?
Well, it's a lot easier if you've actually built your campaign, you built your plan appropriately. So if you built your plan in the context of your business goals, so here's what it should look like. You should say, I've got 3 or 4 key business goals and metrics and targets and milestones associated with those. That's what I'm trying to achieve. And now underlying that, I've got a set of campaigns that I'm expecting are going to deliver on those outcomes. So again, another part of your job as a marketing leader is to regularly assess what's going on, both internally, how have I done against what I said I was going to do, and externally, are there market factors that are driving a change? And if you plan in sort of broad blobs, which we recommend, you want to plan sort of, I think of it as Minecraft mode. Right. So if you're familiar with that, it's relatively low resolution. You want to think in the broad strategic themes that you're planning against. Then it makes it much easier for you to make adjustments. Now, in this last year, people had a huge set of adjustments to make, and that was hopefully unprecedented. So hopefully we're not going to see it again anytime soon. But the reality is some people really had to struggle and sort of throw the plan up in the air. And at some point, you need to do that. You need to say, all right, again, I want to start from the beginning and say, have the goals changed? Mm-hmm. And if the goals have changed, that's where you start. Should I reset my expectations? And a lot of us did this either formally or informally over the last year, where we said, hey, maybe I'm in a market which was positively impacted because I've got a delivery service platform or something like that. My goals are going to go way up. And I need to understand that because all of the other related things where I'm delivering the service have to be ready. But if I'm in the business of business-to-business travel, as an example, you know what? I'm going to set them way down, and I'm going to now, based on the realistic goal adjustments that I've made, I'm going to adjust my plan, adjust the campaign blobs like that to make sure that they're aligned with what these newer expectations are based on either internal or external factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It was quite a year for everyone. And hopefully everybody was able to learn something from it too, and prepare just prepare.
Yeah, we saw that a lot of people who were really agile, who were really differentiated themselves in their function, because they could say, you know what, yes, this unprecedented thing happened. The reality is that the world changes very fast now, and you need to be able to react. You need to have an agile planning methodology and agile planning tools to get there. And in those people who have that kind of agility, are more nimble in their approach, are going to be long-term much more successful, because they're going to be able to react to negative things, but also to positive things. If there's an opportunity in your testing, as an example, to say, aha, here's a great new content theme that I've identified that nobody's addressing well today. I want to be able to throw resources on that and jump on it very quickly in a high quality way and that's about being nimble for positive reasons. It really varies based on whether it's for good or for bad, but whatever it is, you need some agility, or you're not going to be as successful as you could be otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. What on the complete flip side, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen in terms of planning and internal structure or communication, or along the lines of anything we've discussed today?
Yeah, there are a number of themes that happen a lot. First of all is, I mentioned some of these best practices, like building a plan based on business goal. So the opposite of those happens actually more often than the best practice way. So a lot of people are building plans without really anchoring them to some kind of business goals. And if that's the case, if you've just got a bunch of stuff you're doing because I've always done stuff, it's very hard to adapt, to prove your value, to adjust to what's going on in the market. All those things are very difficult to do, and you're not really going to get the same kind of benefit that's there. So the most important thing in my mind is having a set of clear business goals, a plan, meaning these broad strokes, that a set of campaigns whose outcomes are designed to achieve the metrics you've defined in your business goals. So think about that for a second. My goal is, I'm going to get more visibility from my content strategy. I'm going to get leads from my digital efforts, and I'm going to do more same customer sales through my base programs. There are targets associated with each of those around, how many new customers am I going to get? How many upgrades am I going to get to the base? What is visibility in my mind is about, organic search growth, whatever it is. Define those things, and then your campaign plan should be measured based on those same outcomes you're expecting in the goal. So people miss that connectedness. They say, great, I'm going to create more market share, and then down the other end they say, I'm working on some leads. You got to understand what's the connectedness between your goal of market share and the campaigns underlying them. And if you don't have campaigns that have the same kind of metrics for your business goals, it's very unlikely that you're going to meet your targets.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned there some conflicting marketing organizational goals. What about when there's conflicting goals across departments? How have you advised clients around that?
Well, the first thing you do is you need to talk about it. So, because absolutely there's going to be conflict. So go beyond marketing and say marketing and sales, right? So marketing and sales often have this conflicted relationship. They're mostly aligned, but in some cases, you may need to do something as a marketing leader that is not this quarter. In sales may be focused on this quarter or this month, depending on how you measure these things. Same thing inside an organization. Inside an organization, you may have some conflicting objectives from one marketing team to the other team. The first thing you need to do is just name it. So make sure that everyone is clear that there is a conflict, and then you need to ideally work through what are the priorities. What wins when there is a conflicting set of objectives that people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure, and understanding the impact on the other teams and what's coming next. I think that's something that I've seen as well. Well, great. Surprisingly, we're coming up on the half an hour already, but I really appreciate your time with us and joining the event today, and for sharing your insights. Where can people find you?
Great. Well, they can find me on Twitter at my appropriately named Nerd CMO. And also, if they're interested in my book, they can get a free copy. And if you're interested, I can share a link with that if people are interested in a free copy of my book. The book is called The Next CMO, A Guide to Operational Marketing Excellence. And there's so many words on it that I still have to look at it to make sure that I get the title right.
I love that you've marked up your own book.
Absolutely. I've got my little, my favorite areas that I go into all the time. We do have a special link for people who are interested. I can drop it into the chat if that's useful. Yes,
please do. And we have a virtual gift bag as well for folks. So we will add that in there too. That would be great. I'm definitely going to get my own copy.
Great. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for the engagement, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon.